short memories. They don't want to have to pay you. So that's the point at which you pull the picture out and say, remember what this looked like a year ago and what it looks like now? Oh yeah. Okay, maybe I should pay you. So, does that help in that process?
Yes.
Yeah, Great Grow is a really good inoculum for compost. Another place you might want to think about, Alaska humus is a really good inoculum of some of the most fantastic, best fungi. Not all of the Alaska organisms are going to grow here in San Diego or Temecula, but you'll get a massive improvement, especially if you haven't been able to find a source of really good fungi. I was in Santa Fe for the last 3 days. 3 hours. Last 3 days. And a year ago, I was out there giving a seminar, telling people how to make really good compost, all this good stuff. So all these people coming back to the class, oh yeah, I've got really great compost. I put my compost out into my agricultural fields, and the plants, they just grew. They were so beautiful. And we looked at their compost. One little smidge of fungi in 20 fields. But bacteria, massively improved. Protozoa, massively improved. So even though you maybe don't get all the way to the desired level, are your plants still going to show you improved growth? Yeah, we tripled yields. Ooh. But if we got everything all the way back to proper for these organisms, we would have increased yields by 10-fold, 100-fold. Working in Ukraine, we have increased yields in wheat fields, barley, oats. In the Ukraine, we've increased yields by 150% as compared to the conventional systems. So is it possible? How do you make sure it happens every time for you? Life. So this is some work we're doing in a pasture system in New Zealand. Now we've been working with these guys since 2003. And at this point in most of the dairy systems in that part of the world, on into Australia, because we're doing the same thing there. Got lots of data on all of this stuff. But this is one of the first trials that we did. And I love the fact that our Soil Food Web advisor in New Zealand is Russell Snodgrass. Entirely appropriate, don't you think? So in this system, we're looking at a farm that was 300 acres. And most of the farm buildings were in the middle of the farm. So we could split this farm, this dairy, basically into 2 parts. So this part of the farm remained conventional. They just kept doing what they had been doing for these many years. This part of the farm went biological and went organic. Half of the herd was on this side of the farm, and the other half stayed on this side of the farm. So now we can talk about the biological dairy herd. We can talk about the conventional dairy herd. Every animal in this herd started out with facial eczema, which is a muscle wasting disease of the muscles in the face around the jaw. And I always have to kind of swallow when I talk about this, because the smell coming from these animals as the muscles in their face decompose and atrophy and basically are eaten and disappear, and their jaw falls off. They kind of die because they can't eat anything. So huge problem in New Zealand, really massive at the time we were doing this work. So we didn't figure we were going to affect this problem at all, because what causes facial eczema? They were looking at bacterial diseases. They were looking at, was this a fungus? Was this tick-borne? Was it a virus? Was it a fly carried? What's causing this? And no one could figure it out. So 75 pounds per acre every 6 to 8 weeks for a total of 450 pounds per acre of urea. Whoa, what does that cost? So we're talking a couple $1,000s per acre. And they were applying phosphate, sulfur, magnesium, so Sopomac, at the rate of 15 pounds per acre, which is yet an additional cost. So when you compare what was the cost of this versus what's the cost of the chemical, we are hands down way less expensive. Okay, but what's the results? So looking at yields. This is a full ton an acre more yield where we put down the compost tea as compared to the chemical side of the property. This is a full ton. More plant production on the biological side as compared to the chemical side. So is it true that when we go organic, when we go permaculture, we're going to lose yields? No. Absolutely not. Because as long as you start getting the biology down, there is no loss in production. And typically we see an increase, and a significant increase. Look at the improvement in clover in the biological part of the field as compared to the chemical. And of course the ag consultants, what was his first response to seeing all that clover growing over in this half of the farm? Oh my God, you're going to have terrible bloat here. All the animals are going to be dying from the bloat the clover causes. Which part of the herd, which portion of the herd had all the bloat problems?
Control.
It was over here. Because what causes bloat? High levels of nitrate. So where's the high level of nitrate being applied in the system? Urea. And so there's where we have the bloat problem. Actually, the grower here, the dairyman, said that there were no visits of the veterinarians to this half of the farm. This half of the dairy herd required no veterinary attention through the whole entire period of the study. Whereas he was having to get the vet out to look at animals in this part of the herd several times a week.
What about the facial?
Hold on, facial eczema.
You planted that seed.
So, protein is what we have over here, and fixing nitrogen. So all the other grasses in the system, everything we want, is getting that elevated. Well, how does clover actually elevate nitrogen in the soil? Ooh, there's a whole nother couple-hour lecture. It's understanding the nitrogen cycle, because you've been told incorrect things. But now, looking at the increase in all of these nutrients in the biologically grown plant material as compared to the chemically grown plant material. All of these nutrients were elevated. So when we're looking at nitrogen, there's almost a 20% increase in protein, not nitrate, not ammonium in that plant material, but protein. And which one do you want to be eating, nitrate or protein? Nitrate will kill you. Protein, oh, energy. We had stronger cows. Phosphorus, elevated. Potassium elevated by about 10%. Calcium elevated by about 22%, which directly affects the amount of milk and the quality of the milk. So per acre, on the biological side of the farm, the milk production was increased by $307 an acre on the biological side. Zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum. Oh my God, look at the cobalt. Look at the selenium. Isn't that scary? Oh no, we've got toxic levels of selenium and cobalt in the biological grass material. This means we had no cobalt, no selenium to speak of. It was unmeasurable in the chemically grown plant material. Are these important nutrients for your animals?
Hell
yeah. All of the animals on the biological side of the farm recovered from facial eczema. We lost no animal. No animal died from facial eczema. Well, we didn't have any part of that herd die that summer while we were doing this testing. All of them recovered. None of them died. We had about a 15% mortality on the chemical side. Animals were dying, both from bloat as well as losing their job. I mean, the flies. No, I'm not going to do that to you.
Can you talk about fertility?
So, fertility, we had a full ton more an acre production on the biological side as compared to the chemical.
No, I mean calves.
Calves, yes, they do. Russell has the information on the calves. If I remember, no, I'm not going to remember correctly. So I'm going to ask you to email Russell. And I can send you his email address so you can track him down and get that data. So is it biology that's actually affecting this? So there we are. Here's the chemical treated area, and there's where we're at 3 applications of compost tea. And think of the difference in cost here. This is way less expensive as compared to the chemicals going out. We actually decrease the amount of bacteria because our bacteria in the chemical side is more higher than we want it to be, and it's completely unbalanced as compared to your fungi. When we're looking at that ratio of fungi to bacteria, this is a ratio that grows weeds. So on the chemical side, we were growing weeds in that pasture, not grass. On the biological side, when we look at that ratio of fungi to bacteria, look at how they're almost equal. And they're really close to that minimum level. So could we have increased yields? Yeah, if we'd got the biology up more, if we had been able to push it even more. But, dang it. Sorry, I'm all excited. Ratio is what grows your ryegrasses, your pretty good species of fescues and grass species that you want. I want to push it more. I want this to get up to 1-to-1 ratio. I want minimum 300, and we will start growing the best pasture grasses. And the root systems of those grasses will go down as deep as they possibly can. How far down can the roots of your grama grasses, the roots of your bent grasses, your fescues, your really good big and little blue stem, how far down should they be going?
55 feet. 8 to 20 feet.
25 feet. Ryegrasses, 8 to 10 feet. Yep, that's pretty good. Bermuda grass, 6 feet. Ooh, your Bermuda grass isn't going down 6 feet? Okay, you got compaction. So can we improve the growth of all of these things? Can you get EM to help you out and start the process? Sure, but you still have to put in the organisms that are going to take you all the way to equal biomass and higher. If we could get this up to 400 to 400, we would double yields. If we could get 600 to 600, we're going to have a 10-fold increase in production. So could we get 4 or 5 tons more in the biological system as compared to the chemical? Absolutely. But it's in the biology that you've got to be paying attention. Oh, you better have some organic matter in here to grow them. Where's the organic matter coming from to grow these microorganisms? The plants. It's, you know, kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You got to have both of them, and then they bootstrap things up. Now, we improved the species of fungi, so we're getting more of the beneficial. We're losing the disease causers. When we're looking at the flagellates, the amoebae, inadequate levels for nutrient cycling. And look at the ciliates in that soil on the chemical side. Ooh, do we have some compaction problems in here? Yeah. As we get the biology, we've got good nutrient cycling, and we're reducing that compaction level. Have we actually gotten rid of all the compaction in the soil yet? No, because we still have that, you know, the ciliates are a little too high. So keep working. We could do a little bit more to make things even better. So, and of course, this grower, this dairyman, what did he do after this trial finished?
Back to the camera.
No, he didn't. He said, and of course all his neighbors hanging over the back fence. Hey, you weren't down at the feed store buying your chemicals. You're not buying that fungicide, you're not buying the nematicide, you're not buying the herbicide anymore. What's going on? And your pasture looks better than mine. What's going on? And so of course he explained. So all of his neighbors starting to do the same thing. We have started an infection in New Zealand, and it's spreading. So how fast? If all of us were working together and we all got out there and started infecting our neighborhoods with this kind of knowledge, could we change things in this country? Absolutely. So now, mycorrhizal colonization, Notice that absolutely no mycorrhizal colonization at all on the chemical side because the chemicals are killing these organisms. And even without inoculation, we're starting to get mycorrhizal colonization on the biological side within 3 months. By the time this comes to the next year, the whole field, all of these plants are now connected together below ground. Your whole field will be healthy and growing really well. If you wipe out the mycorrhizal fungi, the whole field's going to be in just as much trouble. So really think about your pastures as being one single organism. All those plants are connected together below ground, except for the weeds. And of course, we don't want weeds. We want to make sure that we're really pushing the mycorrhizal fungi so they will suck the nutrients out of your weeds and give them to the plants that you want. We worked in tomatoes. So, large scale. We helped ZZ2 in South Africa grow 5,000 hectares, which is 12,500 acres of tomatoes. And when we first started with them, they had to be out of tomatoes because of the diseases and the pests for a full 10 to 14 years before they could put tomatoes back in the system and get one crop off of it. The next year, the crop would be wiped out from the diseases and pests. Because they didn't have any, well, it wasn't soil, it was dirt. So, how do you fix this problem? There are only 18% of their tomatoes were first quality that could be sold as whole tomatoes. Everything else had to go for juice, canning, sauce, all of those things. Yield of 80 tons per hectare. One growing season. Using compost, so we're putting compost out at about a ton per acre, sometimes up to as much as 10 tons per acre, depending on the biology in the compost and how bad that dirt was. What do you have to recover? What do you have to resuscitate? And so in that first growing season, almost all of their land, we are now growing tomatoes year after year after year after year. So when we came to ZZ2, they had to have 300,000 hectares of land in order that somewhere on that property they could find the 5,000 hectares to grow tomatoes on. Every year they were buying 30 more farms in order to maintain the ability to grow 5,000 hectares of tomatoes to keep the business alive. Today, they're growing those tomatoes on the same 5,000 hectares and are developing these really good communities of microorganisms below ground to sustain the growth of the tomatoes. They've reduced water use by 70% as compared to the conventional systems. Their tomatoes, their whole tomatoes, 50% first quality. If you go to South Africa and go into a restaurant, you will hear people say, "Are the tomatoes in the salad that you're going to sell me? Are the tomatoes in the salad ZZ2 tomatoes?" And if the waiter says, "Well, no, we couldn't get any," they'll say, "I don't want the salad." Because it's got that kind of reputation for flavor, for taste. So working with these guys, getting the water movement, getting the biology, getting this whole permaculture system going. Need to do that. Currently, too, they're getting somewhere around 110 to 120 tons per hectare of tomatoes. So that's almost double your yields. Let's reduce. So all of these benefits. I mean, can I keep going on all of these? How about weeds? What happens to weeds? Here's a grower that's been in onions, chemical onion production for like the last 50 years. His father owned this land. He got the land. He's been growing onions. His fields are 150 hectares, which is what, about 500 acres in each of his fields. So he planted onions in these fields on the same day. This is his chemical field. He has applied 2 applications of Roundup. Can you find the onions in this field?
Yeah, tiny little.
Kind of hard, isn't it? How about over there? Can you see the onions? It's kind of lost because of the weeds. Think of what these weeds are going to look like in another week. Are the onions going to be able to successfully grow? Well, okay, so today he was applying the 3rd application of Roundup. Still didn't work. We have Roundup-ready weeds in Tasmania. So he had to go out here with Heritage, and then I think he went out with another herbicide to try to knock those weeds down. Let's look at the field where we used, on the date I'm going to show you, there have been 2 applications of compost tea put out. Yeah, go forward. Finding weeds?
I see the onions.
Yeah. And see, and the onions are taller. They're healthier, they're happier. So his yields here were, triple amount of onion biomass being produced in this field as compared to the chemical field. As long as he maintained the biology in this soil, he got these results. Well, there are weeds in here. There's one. Can you find any? Oh, okay, there's one. And it's not just this shot. I didn't pick like the best place, Throughout the whole 150 acres that we're looking at here, there are basically no weeds to be seen. So when we're looking at the chemical onions, planted the same day as the biological, these onions are only about 3 to 4 inches tall. Root systems are only going down about 2 to 3 inches, and they're already diseased. See the brown striping in there? We already have pink rot starting to happen. So yield, not very good. Diseases, pests, weeds, just wiping them out. But where we got the biology, look at the structure in that soil. Look at the airways and the passageways to allow oxygen, water, and roots to go as deep as they possibly can. This onion seedling is about 6 inches tall, and that root system is going down 1.5 feet. So that's what we want to be seeing in our soils. And so as we marry permaculture and soil biology understanding together, this is a dynamic duo that we can really do a great job of converting everybody on the planet. Now, people will then, of course, always say, well, you picked the field that didn't have any weeds. So, here's the field a couple of weeks later, because we want, it took us a while, not a couple of weeks, a couple of days later. And what I wanted to show you was this strip here where no compost tea has been applied here. And look at the weeds. Did we have weeds in this field? Oh, yeah. And we knock them back by getting the biology out there. So the food web. Understanding what compaction actually is. So I want to zip through that. I'm not going to take questions to the end. I'm sorry. Because I want to get through this understanding. What's so bad about anaerobic? What's so bad about compaction? Why is it such a problem? So in your landscapes, most people think, or at least if you talk to arboriculturalists, you would think that this is how the roots of plants grow. They go down a couple feet and then go sideways. And now it's total warfare. This plant is fighting with the grass. It's fighting with the roots coming from that shrub. It's fighting with that evergreen for the nutrients, for the water. We put our plants into coffins. And then we wonder why they're all diseased and why they're all unhappy and unhealthy. So look at the compaction layer. Look at the black color right along that layer of compaction. This is what happens when you go anaerobic. You get this black color. Instead of rich dark brown, you get black. What's causing that? Why will these roots not grow down into that soil? Roots of trees can push their way through concrete. It's because we're going anaerobic. Water moving through here hangs up and then goes anaerobic. Oxygen cannot move through water very well at all. So I want to give an example of a compost pile where I flew into this composting operation, and as I'm flying in, here's 1,000 windrows, 300 feet long, nicely lined up, big composting operation. This was ZZ2 when I first started working with them. They could not make good compost. They always had human pathogens. They always had weed seeds. They always had problems. And yet they're composting properly, according to a number of different experts, but they just could not get the results that they wanted to see. So they brought me in. And so as we're flying in, I'm looking down. Each individual row is covered with black plastic. And they have happily tucked the black plastic in all the way around. So what have they done to oxygen? Totally anaerobic. So I landed downwind of the yard. Notice I won't call it compost at this time. And as soon as I opened that door to the helicopter, I just about passed out because the ammonia in the air burned my lungs. And it was not good. So I already know, just from that, those two observations, this is not compost. So what do we got to do? Well, what's going on? First of all, let's cover that. So I went upwind. So this is on the upwind side. Here's the windrow. You can see that this material, what was the windrow made of? I asked them to bring a front end loader and take a scoop out of the side. So now you can see the profile into the compost pile. You can see where there's a lot of chunky stuff, but they were trying to grind up this woody material. They were told to grind the wood to 5 micrometer diameter size. Oxygen is going to move through that? So you take a look at this. There's absolutely no airways, no passageways, because they have ground up so much of that woody material way too fine. Oxygen can't move through there. Look at the other thing that they did. You see all those little round road apples? So cow manure, horse manure, and they also have some chicken manure in here. This pile was 50% manure. How hot is this going to get? How fast? So this is about a week into the composting process, and already you can see that we're starting to go anaerobic. So oxygen was up about 10 parts per million out here. By the time we get here, it's 6.5 parts per million oxygen. We're almost going anaerobic. And the reason I know this is because this particular organism, winning in competition with all our good aerobic organisms, it's telling me that oxygen is dropped below 6.5, or this organism could not win in competition with all the good guys. Well, what is this organism? I always kind of have to laugh and giggle when someone, opens a pile like this and says, "Look at all these great fungi." What? Wrong. What is that? Those are actinobacteria.
They're what?
Actinobacteria. So they are bacteria that grow in filaments. They suppress, these species of actinobacteria suppress mycorrhizal fungi. So is this bad compost?
Yes. It's not compost.
All right, it's not really compost, but man, could you make an inoculum? Could you dig this stuff out and inoculate your brassica field and prevent mycorrhizal colonization? Hoo-yah! But don't put this anywhere close to any other kind of plant, because they're not going to be happy. So this is not a fungus. This is actinobacteria. We used to call these actinomycetes, but these are not fungi. Mycete means fungal. They are not fungi. They are bacteria. Yes, in the scientific world, we went through about 20 years of nasty warfare. So the guys working on the actinobacteria proved beyond a shadow of a doubt these are bacteria, not fungi. So ashy, white layers like this. Now, we're at 6.5 parts per million, but these guys keep using up the oxygen. So where other things are now going to outcompete, too little oxygen, even for the actinobacteria. So we know right here, we are anaerobic. We are below 5.5 parts per million oxygen, and we are truly anaerobic. So all the anaerobic organisms starting to grow in here. And what are these guys starting to do to your major nutrients, to pH, to toxicity in this material? The other thing that's happening here is all these organisms growing that fast on this really party food, manure in there. They're elevating temperature. As microorganisms grow, they release heat. It's just saying, think about yourself. The last time you performed reproductive acts, was there a little heat involved?
Not as much as you would have liked.
So, getting toasty in this pile. Out here, we are about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. By the time you get right there, you're at about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. By the time you get there, you're at about 165. By the time you're getting into the middle of the pile, you're at 175, and there are spots that are approaching 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And as my little thermometer I'm poking in there is showing that temperature starting to get real close to 180, Elaine is backing away. Because what's going to happen? Anaerobic, making alcohol. What's the heat of combustion of alcohol? You don't even need a spark. You just need some oxygen. And what did we just put in that bottle? Okay. What happens if this windrow goes off? I'm standing in about 1,000 windrows worth of compost, well, not compost, putrefied organic matter, all of which could well have alcohol. And if this goes off, what's happening to all the rest of the piles? Could Elaine be just a piece of toast, very burnt on the ground and kind of incurring biochar? Hey!
Crystalline structure. Yeah.
So what are we really looking at? What's going on? What's causing this black color? Well, first of all, high temperature, low oxygen. What are we doing with our carbon? We're starting to turn it into charcoal. Now, we're not going to go all the way to biochar here. Not getting that hot, but we are definitely on the way to charcoal. And that means we're taking all that carbon chain that was in our organic matter, and we're turning it into a material that microorganisms can't use. No more bacteria growing, no more fungi. You know, once it's really all been converted. Well, it's not all converted yet, but it's going that way. So I'm making a material that's not going to be good for maintaining the growth of these really beneficial organisms, if they were still here, around my plants. Another thing that happens, so let's keep going with the next couple slides are all going to be in the same format, where we're looking at aerobic conditions here for nitrogen. The predominant form of nitrogen in any soil is organic matter. It's in protein. It's in the organisms and the products which organisms have made. The inorganic, leachable, plant available. Which one of these forms is plant available? Well, nitrate for your annuals, ammonium for your perennials. Nitrite, that'll kill your plant. So the forms of soluble, leachable nitrogen in aerobic conditions. When we start losing oxygen, the aerobic organisms, their enzymes will not function anymore. They'll go to sleep. The anaerobes wake up because their enzymes function in that reduced oxygen condition. So they wake up, and we're going to keep this in the system. The problem is these anaerobic organisms are going to take any of these soluble, leachable forms and convert it into ammonia, NH3. It's a gas. Ferrilites, swamp gas, that's your phosphorus going bye-bye. So how can you grow plants when you've lost your soluble nitrogen, your soluble phosphorus, your soluble sulfur? Good luck. We do not want anything to go anaerobic, do we? So keep going. Anaerobic organic acids. I have picked out the ones that have a certain putrefaction. Acetic acid, only produced under anaerobic conditions. What is that? Butyric acid, only produced under anaerobic conditions. Valeric acid, that's one of my favorites. There's a little alliteration here. What's that smell? Vomit. Ooh, yummy. Putrescine, what does that smell like? Decaying flesh. So let's mix these odors in there. What do you call that when you've got all of that? When you go back to biodynamics, when you go back to the father of composting in the Western world, Sir Albert Howard, coming back from India, learning the Indori method, he called this sour soil. This is the sour. People pick up compost or soil and actually take a lick of it. Ooh, yeah. Think that would be sour? When you look at these materials, when you have these things in pure form, what's the pH on them? Yeah, down around 2. So as we go anaerobic, let's say all of our organic material started out with a pH of 8. As we start producing these acids, what's going to happen? Well, there's a certain buffering capacity that organic matter has. So there's going to be some amount of time where the organic matter is going to absorb that excess acid, that excess hydrogen. So you're not going to be picking up these smells right away. It takes a little time. So as those acids are being produced, you're not going to see your pH drop. It's going to hang out. It's not really going to drop. And then all of a sudden you overcome, these acids overcome the buffering capacity of your compost. Boom! And that pH drops rapidly and drastically. Do not put any roots into this material once either the smells start happening or the pH starts dropping, because this will kill your plant. So, the most toxic material to plants is alcohol. And of course, once we go anaerobic, what are some of these anaerobic organisms producing in our compost pile? Alcohol. We get a high enough concentration of alcohol. 1 part per million is all we need for spontaneous combustion to occur if we get a temperature of 180. And typically in most anaerobic conditions, we're getting 25 parts per million alcohol. High concentration. And that alcohol is going to solubilize any plant material that it comes in contact with. Now, I usually at this point somebody in the crowd says, but we drink alcohol all the time. How come it doesn't kill us? but wait, it does.
We're not drinking enough.
Why is it you can drink some alcohol? What mechanism do you have to detoxify alcohol in your body?
Liver.
Yeah. Does your plant have a liver? No. Wetland plants, riparian plants do have mechanisms for dealing with alcohol production. So if your plant produces an parenchyma, if it produces a catalase, it can combat alcohol. But terrestrial plants, no way. That alcohol is going to solubilize a root, and a root that's been turned into mush doesn't do a real good job of taking up nutrients. Only under anaerobic conditions do we produce a bunch of aldehydes. For example, formaldehyde is produced under anaerobic conditions. What's that going to do to your root system?
Preserved.
Yeah, a preserved root. How much uptake of nutrients or water is that going to be doing for your plant? Dead plant. There's a bunch of phenols. So anaerobic conditions, are these good things? Absolutely not. Okay, if you want to make something that's so toxic, it will kill things. But that is not what we're trying to do. Because you can't kill just the bad guys. You're killing good guys too. And it takes a lot of time and effort to come back from that. So, now I don't care whether we're dealing with trees or shrubs or grass or any kind of plant you're trying to grow. When you see that compacted black layer, you're losing nutrients. You're doing massive damage with pH. We put calcium carbonate, we put lime and gypsum in here in order to neutralize that. Yeah, right. It lasts for about 2 weeks to maybe 4 weeks. And biology is going to rule. You got to get this oxygen. You got to get structure built in your soil. So, summary here. Here we go. Bacteria and fungi build the bacteria make the microaggregates. Fungi make the macroaggregates. Start to build structure, and then the larger critters make the superhighways. They make the lakes, the rivers, the streams to hold water, to move oxygen through this system. How far down do roots go? This is a 3-month-old grass plant. 3 days previous to this picture, before we punched a core into the soil and pulled this column of soil with all the roots intact up out of the soil, sliced the PVC pipe open, used a little bit of a hose to wash the soil off. This is Hendrika Schraven that worked, that did most of the actual work here. He's a 6.5-foot tall person. And he's holding that plant just about waist high. That root system is 4.5 feet deep. In 3 months, we planted it as seeds in July. This is harvested in November. 3.5-month-old grass plant. How far down are those roots? 4.5 feet. We mowed this grass a couple times during the summer, but 3 days before we took this column out, pulled it out, we mowed this to 1/2 inch. If it's true that if you cut the top part of your plant off at 1/2 inch, it will cause the roots to slough 1/2 inch or deeper. That means in 3 days, this grass root system grew from 1/2 inch to 4.5 feet. Does that sound believable?
No.
We didn't lose any of the root system when we cut this plant. Only if you've got a sick, unhealthy plant does it slough the root system when you cut the top part of the plant off. So there's a lot of kind of ridiculous information going on around out in the world of pasture and grazing and what do animals do to grasses. If it's sick, if it's unhealthy, if it's unhappy, yeah, you eat the top, yeah, you will lose the root system. But it's kind of a little bit of a smart-ass response here. How could Elaine do that? If you cut your hair off, do your feet fall off? It's kind of the same thing here. Okay, so how far down do roots go?
Your drawers drop.
So just about done. This is work that was done by the Conservation Research Institute, which used to be called, is what the Soil Conservation Service was called before it changed names. And now today, what do we call the Soil Conservation Service? It's the Natural Resource Conservation Service. I love, bureaucrats change the name all the time. But back around the turn of the century, they sent people out to the Great Plains of the United States to dig pits 40 feet deep. And then took fire hoses and washed the surface gently, washed that profile off so they could see where the roots of these different plants were. Plate glass put up against that profile, against that surface, tracing paper, and they traced these root systems by hand. Dave Coleman has wonderful stories about all this because when he was a young scientist, he was involved in all of that and describes doing this. And now tracings of these different kinds of root systems. This scale over here goes down 25 feet. The most productive grasses are those things that have the deepest root systems. A little bit less productive, or maybe at 15, 10, maybe 8 feet. By the time you get to things that only have a foot or two of root system associated, these are not productive grasses. These are not grasses any of us want to see in our pastures. When you're looking at cheatgrass, where's the picture of cheatgrass in this, on this? Can you find it?
Wow.
Because cheatgrass does not put its roots down very far, ever. So do you want to be growing cheatgrass? No nutrition. You are not going to be able to keep your animals alive. And to some extent, this starts to explain it. We've got to get the fungi back into the soil in order to build the air passageways and hallways to let oxygen, water, and your root systems grow as deep as they possibly can. So we've got to be building structure down, at least the 25 feet that grass is. How deep will a tree go? How far down to trees? How far down to, look at this, cereal rye. Its root system is 380 miles in distance. So if you took all of that root system out and you actually measured the total length, 380 miles of roots on a single cereal rye, and this root system easily goes down 15 feet. So do we understand roots? Do we understand plants? So I'm going to finish right there because the sign says stop, and we will continue.